Hey, what is going on, guys? Mac Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we are going to be taking a look at the NF Audio NM2 Plus IM. Now, before we get into today's review, I just have to give a big shout out to Shenzhen Audio for providing these for review. Shenzhen Audio is an online audio retailer that carries many different brands, and they've sent me a lot of things in the past to take a look at. So once again, big thanks to them for providing these for review. I will link their store in the description below. Now, the NM2 Plus is I'd say, entry-level to slightly above entry-level offering from NF Audio, coming in at about $170. And it is using what they call their dual cavity dynamic driver design. That essentially is just a dynamic driver with a second cavity behind the main driver that they say is used for tuning and smoothing out the driver performance. So just a little bit of their design marketing speak there. So let's go ahead and get specs out of the way, and then we will talk about how these sound. So the NM2 Plus is using a 18 ohm dynamic driver with a sensitivity of 108 dB a milliwatt and a frequency range of 10 to 40,000 hertz. And it is using the QDC style 2-pin connector, which is a bit uncommon on cheaper IEMs like this. So let's go ahead and get into the build here. So NM2 Plus, like I said, $170. It looks pretty nice. I say it's 5-axis CNC'd, and here, let me zoom you on in. There we go. So yeah, 5-axis CNC'd, metal body all around, the little NF logo on the top. It's a nice looking IM. It's kind of a weird shape, which we'll talk about in just a second in terms of comfort. And then the QDC connector, which is basically a 2-pin connector, except the body is outside of the IM instead of inside, which is a little bit more secure than most 2-pin connectors. Then not an insanely long nozzle or anything, but not particularly short either. It has a little bit of a weird curvature to it. But they look nice and they feel nice in the hand, and I would say they definitely feel up to par, if not slightly above their $170 price point. Now, in terms of comfort, personally, I don't find them particularly comfortable. I find that this part here is not flattened enough, and it kind of hits the structure of my inner ear. And the nozzle is kind of weird how it just kind of tapers off. It gets skinnier, fat, and it's kind of skinnier. And they're kind of hard to get to seal in my experience. And yeah, I really can't wear them for particularly long without bothering me. So personally, I don't find them comfortable, but once again, IM shape is going to be vary a lot more depending on person, because your inner ear shape varies quite a bit. So me personally, not very comfortable, but you may find them somewhat more comfortable. Okay, now for included accessories. So this is the box they come in. There's also a sleeve on the outside of this with like the branding. But you open it up and you have the IMs kind of presented to you in this little thing here. It looks kind of nice, little circle. And then you pop that out, and then you have your tips. You have 6 pairs of tips, the balance tips and the base tips, and 3 sizes each. Nice little circle. And then on this side, you have your like paperwork, and there's also a case under here. If I can get the paper out. Yeah, you can see there's a little like hard case for them that's kind of hidden underneath there. So if you get one of these, be sure to get the case out. But yeah, nice box, decent packaging on these, and kind of a nice little presentation they give you on the NM2 Plus. And now in terms of cables, this is a very solid cable, kind of like a nice twisted silver coated copper with a nice heavy 3.5 millimeter jack that says NF Audio on it. Then the QDC style connectors up here. If I can stop dropping them, there we go. And yeah, this is a solid cable all in all. It actually reminds me a lot of the Dunu Luna's cable. It was also a very similar cable to this. So yeah, decent stock cable all around. I don't think many people are going to want to replace this. So yeah, good cable on the NM2 Plus. Okay, so now let's move into the sound section of the NM2 Plus. So the NM2 Plus, at least for the balance tips, has quite a bass boost. I would say about a 6 or 7 dB bass shelf. That's a little bit more mid-bass than sub-bass. The mid-bass, I'd say, is about maybe 2 or 3 dB above where the lowest end of the sub-bass is. Sub-bass seems to roll very slightly at the end. But yeah, just kind of like a big 6 or 7 dB mid-bass shelf on them. And then after that, you have a weird mid-range. So it's a little bit shouty, but it's shouty like later in the frequency range. There's like a weird kind of like 4.5 or 5K peak that's kind of bothersome. And then there's also kind of like maybe an 8 or 9K peak that's also kind of bothersome. But it's a very, very weird mid-range. It's kind of thin in like that 800 to 1K. It's kind of weird thinness there that comes up with like a very shouty upper mid-range, but the shout is like very shifted over to the point where it's kind of annoying because 5K is a little bit more annoying than 3K, at least to most people. So very weird frequency range on the NM2 Plus. Now, as far as other aspects go, let's talk detail. So detail on these is a bit strange, and that's for a few reasons. A lot of that's to do with the frequency response. So I kind of actually want to talk separation first. So the NM2 Plus sounds fairly solid on very simple tracks, where if it's just like maybe one instrument and just like a kick drum or something, it's decent. The bass is nice impact, albeit it's very boosted, but decent impact. Treble sounds decent, and they just sound kind of like a V-shaped IM that's not terrible. But the second you put anything with more than like 2 or 3 instruments on it, like either more complex orchestral tracks or rock tracks or anything that's much more busy, these just die. They become super muddy. The treble just becomes super low res with not much note definition, and they just fall apart with anything complicated. Like the bass with like a single simple kick drum is nice, but any more complex bass notes and it just becomes a muddy mess, and the treble becomes really clouded over by the bass, and they just become very just low res and muddy. So not a big fan of that. Soundstage on them, decent. Nothing to write home about. I didn't really note anything special about it. Imaging, not great at all, because they muddy up so much and that everything just becomes kind of a smooth, muddy mess. Timbre is actually really bad, surprisingly. For it being a DD-IEM, it's just not very good timbre. Strings sound super, super off on these, at least in more complex tracks, and ones where it's very simple, not terrible string representation, but otherwise just not great, which is surprising. I've heard BAs with better timbre than this thing. So all in all, the NM2 Plus just not particularly great. And forget about the bass tips. That's the last thing you need on this, is even more bass. So as far as my thoughts on this goes, I really don't particularly like the NM2 Plus. Like I said, very simple tracks does okay, but other than that, it just becomes kind of muddy and it doesn't sound particularly great in my opinion. For the price, I would definitely take the Moondrop KXXS. I think those are a much better sounding IM that are also very kind of warm and bassy, but they have much better note separation or far less muddy. So that would be my choice over this for roughly the same price. Or you can get the Starfield, which is even cheaper and essentially the same thing as the KXXS. So all in all, NM2 Plus not getting my recommendation just because it just sounds too muddy and not particularly great in my opinion. But anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed my review of the NM2 Plus. If you want to check these out, I will link them in the description below. I'll also go ahead and link the KXXS at Shenzhen Audio, so you can maybe pick that up instead of these if you're looking to buy something. But again, thanks to Shenzhen Audio for providing these for review. Links to my Twitter, my contact email, and all other relevant information in the description below. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.